Okay. Test, test. You getting me? All right. Testing audio. How's everyone doing today? Okay, so as you see, we are for the second time. We weren't here last week. By the way, I missed everyone. Sorry I wasn't here. I was in British Columbia in Canada at a wonderful wedding, a white wedding, as we say, a little bit of snow on the ground. I had hoped to see other friends. I see Nadine is here. I had hoped to run into some other friends who live in the area, but things kept me occupied
You're
with the
in.
wedding.
It's him
But
talking
here we
live.
are. So this is the second time, week before
With
last, and
menu
then this week,
items
where we've
are down in
begun
the
to
chat.
use the community room. And the
Disconnect.
idea there
Don't
is to
know.
be a little more
Video,
free
audio. If
so
you
that
want to
we've
talk,
got, it's more like a sit around the
you're
table
in.
and have a conversation.
Oh, there it is
So
there.
Yeah, but this is
that's,
YouTube.
if you hear someone other than me,
It's not
you
Yes.
can mute your speaker or your microphone. Just mute your microphone
But
until you're
YouTube
ready to
doesn't
speak, and
live.
then
This is
hopefully you can
live.
jump in. Let me make sure that my audio is working. Hold on just a second.
For some reason, he's showing a recording.
I need to check that before I go too far. I don't hear anyone, Dave, so
that will cause you problems if you look at it long enough.
see.
There you are.
Double check.
They're having some problems.
Oh boy, the stream has ended.
It's okay. He accidentally did that. Just leave this. Let's see what happens. We're smart enough
1
now to
second, we're
know
looking
that
into
they're it's not us. There he is.
Guys, I hear you all over the place, and I hardly can hear Ross. This is Jim.
Give me 1 second. We're ironing it out. Give us just a couple of minutes. It's probably something on my end. 1 second.
Why are you not muted? A lot of you folks are not muted.
Yeah, you might.
You're in the boys' community room instead of
Okay.
Yeah, it shows them connected.
that they've been using. I don't know if they're trying different platforms to see what works better or what, but it's all in the Discord, but it's different community rooms.
Hey Libby, how are you? How is everyone? I can hear you, Libby. So if you don't have your mic muted, now that I have mine fixed, poor Seth has to deal with me every week. It's like it's good that he's here though. He can help me. Okay, so now as I was saying, it's good to be back. I was in Canada last week, and I am pleased to be back. And today we're talking about, I think, you wouldn't think it would be, but I guess it is pretty controversial in that people are very opinionated including me. And so what we talked about today in the class, or what I talked about, was my opinion, which is not always accepted by everyone. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. But anyway, so I'm happy to hear some other comments, some other thoughts. But I prefer, if people have differing opinions, that they bring forth the evidence. In other words, what I want to start off our conversation with today, as you can tell from the class, almost exceptionally, or without exception, I should say, I tried to present everything from the scriptures which gives differing views. So, for instance, there are different views as to where the crossing happened, where the crossing where is the Reed Sea, Yam Suf in Hebrew? Is it in the Nile Delta? Is it the Gulf of Suez, what we call the Gulf of Suez now? Or is it the Gulf of what we call the Gulf of Aqaba now? Is it one of those three? And various people, generally, it depends on where you put your Sinai or your Horeb. So if, for instance, I want my Horeb to be Jebel al-Luz because there is this wonderful movie, and I'm convinced, and I'm not really making fun of it. I want you to understand that there are people, very brilliant people, who take that angle. Then I'm going to make my Red Sea, or my Yom Suf, has got to be the Gulf of Aqaba. I also have to move my wilderness of Shur, must be east of Aqaba. I want everybody to make sure you have a good Bible map. You can look these up online. I even posted 2 here in the Discord so people can go look at those. But I want you to think, we have to find these geographic reference points, as many as we can. Some of them are not known. The first question is, do we know where Yam Suf is according to the Bible? Well, we get certain geographic points. Migdal, different references that I covered in the class. So we have to find the wilderness of Shur. And then we have to look at the evidence and let the evidence declare what we can get closest, or how we get the closest. So I really want to open it up. I want some other people to give me their views. So I honestly stated that according to the biblical text, we have 3 bodies of water biblically that are all referred to by using Yam Suf. And I have those references. We can go back through. 1 Kings 9:26 calls the Gulf of Aqaba Yam Suf. The Exodus chapter 10, verse 19 refers to that marshy area in the Nile Delta as Yam Suf. And then Numbers 33, 9 through 11 really seems to push more towards the identification of what we now call the Gulf of Suez. So it matters. The details matter. Geography matters. If we're trying to figure out where they crossed, all of these details matter. So, rather than me continue on, who has some comments, questions, opinions about not just Yom Suf, but other details from the class? Now, remember, if you want to, you can either use the emoji to raise your hand, or if you have a burning question or comment, simply unmute your mic and join the conversation. Let me know what you're thinking. And if no one jumps in here, I guess I'll just keep on spouting my views. Jim Brumgard, I see you unmuted. Does that mean you have some comments?
Yes, I do. I've always wondered about, the location of the Exodus, and I always found, I guess my earlier Christian understanding was it was the Gulf of Suez is where they crossed. And I know some maps identify a point of land about, I don't know, 10 miles down along the western coast of the Gulf of Suez as this, let me find the name of it so I pronounce it correctly, the one that's pi something.
Yeah,
You prob-
Pi-Hahiroth, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that
Mhm.
one, and that's where that's at. And in fact, I was looking at a um, can't even think what you call it. My goodness, a map this on my phone
Yeah,
today,
okay.
and just found that there is a that point of land does have some kind of monument, and it mentions it as a religious destination, where the people that believe that that's correctly identified as the point where they crossed at. And obviously, if it's up in that marshier area, like the Bitter Sea or whatever it's called,
Yeah.
um, that has to be misidentified as where they departed. Because, I mean, I've heard it in Christian-based sermons, especially in my old worldwide days, that they were stuck at this point of land. There was no other escape except to cross the water. And so, where is this point? And I guess that's the main thing is, what is that location, and where do you identify as Pahirot at? And I guess that's because I don't
Yeah,
see that on some of the maps that you downloaded, so
yeah, Aryeh
or uploaded.
points out, yeah, if you look at, he says it's Pi-Hahirot would be pronounced in English as, well, I just said it, Pi-Hahirot. So we won't take off for pronunciation, but he's right. That's or Aryeh is right. That's the way you would pronounce it. The debate is on every single, almost without exception, almost every single point of geography is debated. And here's my point. One of the things that I find interesting is that a lot of people will bring their Horev into the text and then they assign these areas around that. So, for instance, we'll get off of Pi Hachirot and focus for just a moment on the wilderness of Shur. Now, I want you to you can look this up online. You can flip to the back of your Bible. Most study Bibles have decent study maps, and go look to see um, what you can find in terms of the location of this particular wilderness, the wilderness of Shur. Look up the way of Shur. Almost without exception, in the Sinai Delta, as we call it now, in that northwestern portion of the Sinai Delta, what we find is on almost every map, you'll see that that is the area in which the wilderness of Shur is. So if we follow the story as it's laid out in the biblical text, when they crossed through the sea, through Yam Suf, they find themselves in the wilderness of Shur. Now, if you place the sea that they crossed down at the Gulf of what we call now the Gulf of Suez or the Gulf of Aqaba, you've got to move the wilderness of Shur. And although P. Hachirot, look, there are several different opinions on this. I think Dave Tyler and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of these locations, at least at the crossing, I think David Roll does an excellent job in the Egypt portion of charting and chronicling where that is. So let's say I know I'm kind of going around the world with this, Jim, but one thing that I want to say is this: if you don't know for sure where Pi Hahirot is, and you go, well, is there another location mentioned? And we see Migdal. Now, I already saw one comment from someone who usually likes what I teach. Evidently, they no longer like what I teach. In fact, this particular person said that and I'm paraphrasing, but I so gave my opinion and ignored all others that now this person doubts anything that I've ever talked about, it sounds like. But one of the things this person brought up is that Migdal, because it can mean a tower, that there were towers everywhere. So the fact that I'm saying Migdal is in Egypt, This person disagrees with me. And why is that? Because, in my opinion, this person put Migdal where they wanted it to make their Sinai and their sea fit. Give you an example. These are the verses that describe Migdal's location. I have them in my notes because I watched the video again with you this morning. Numbers 33, 6 through 8. Jeremiah 44, 1. Jeremiah 46, 14. Ezekiel 29, 10. Ezekiel 30 and verse 6. So this is interesting because it is a place. It's clearly a place in these verses. Now, what I would say, let's say someone says, no, Ross, you're wrong. You're only giving your opinion and you're not allowing others. I would say, show me a verse that refers to the Exodus that speaks of a Migdal, but it is referring to a tower made of stone, if you will, and not a location, a geographic spot. I would say it's the same with some of these others, these other locations. So to answer the question, you can look at a map, Jim, and it depends on who made the map. Where do we put these locations? Look, do you have the verse off the top of your head, Jim, where P. Hacherot is mentioned? I mean, I can quickly look it up, but do you have that? Is it Exodus 14? Yeah. Yeah, Exodus 14:1. And then the Lord, or Jehovah, said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi Ha-Hirot. I'm just going to look and see if this particular study Bible has anything to say about that. See, it doesn't even touch it. A lot of people won't touch these geographic locations. Okay. Now, Jim, did you have something else? I know I didn't necessarily address an exact location for.
No,
your,
no,
yeah.
you handled what I was asking. So I really don't have anything more at this moment. No.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ross, can I say something real quick?
Absolutely, Dave. How are you?
Good, good. It's been a long week here, brothers, sisters. But you know, the world is still moving.
Yep.
So the deal is this: that just some of my studying of this, and of course we went to a potential site for Horeb, but the issue that I look back, there's two things. The trade routes that were established at that time, which would have been far easier to take a bunch of grandma and grandpas and chickens and sheep, number one, and so the geography is extremely important. The southern route is very difficult if the Bible is right about 600,000 men plus women and children, and everything else they have. So I think you have to be realistic that doesn't talk about the Elohim creating bridges over mountains or tunnels through mountains. So these people are gonna. A lot of old people are walking. Probably people dying along the way. So that's an issue. And then I've been studying the environment back. As you go backwards in time, the environment was very different in the Middle East. Israel wasn't so deserty. In fact, if you go back far enough, the Sahara was a beautiful, lush paradise. So at the end of the day, I just want to say that I think, what Dr. Hearn, Deborah Hearn has done is very intellectually seems good to me. It doesn't violate any of the Bible's constraints, and it on the other side, it also makes sense that this is the way they would have gone. And that's why I believe that. I don't know. I wasn't there, but I have a sneaking suspicion that that's it. That's really all I wanted to say, Ross.
No, I appreciate it. Stick around, Dave, because I know you've done a lot of work on this as well, and your input will be needed as you see an opportunity to jump in. It's one thing that I was going to bring up is I do have the following in my note. Back to Jim's question about Pi Hachirot. This is from my notes, some suggest that this is an Egyptian word. In other words, get this, which may mean temple of HRT. It's a word that means, or here could mean waters of the canal, the dwelling of Hator. And then I have several different academic articles that propose that. So there are as many opinions on this as you can imagine, and various people have put forward various theories. What it really comes down to, almost every time when it comes down to where did the Exodus take place, what sea did they cross, where is Mount Horeb, the sea crossing is very near and dear to a fundamentalist heart. We want the miracle big, as big as you can imagine. So every bit of this story is miraculous, and it's caused people to really dig into the details. Dave mentioned several places in the Bible, it tells us that those who left Egypt were 600,000, or roughly. In fact, there is one very specific number that's given by the priestly literature, 603,550, and that number occurs 3 or 4 times in the text of the Bible. So if you have 603,550 men counted at the age in which the counting is done, plus women, children, and so forth, you're looking at estimates of around 3 million, 2.5 to a little over 3 million people. Now that is the size of it for those who live in the States. I know we have people in other countries as well, but it's the size of, say, a Houston, Texas, or a Chicago with all the suburbs. So if a group that large leaves, let's say, the region of Goshen, and we're fairly certain about where this is in the Nile Delta, this is what some people have said, when the first one set out, how long will it be for the end of that line even moves? So this isn't a very fast process, but we get the impression as we read the story, let's assume that those numbers are accurate and correct, then once they cross through the sea, we have to find out where they go next, and it seems to be very clearly indicated in the text, the wilderness of Shur, which is east of that Nile Delta region. Okay, hey Julia, I see your hand raised. How are you today?
I'm all right. Can you hear me?
I hear you perfectly well.
Okay. What I was going to say is I think people want it to be a big miracle because the first thing they think is that someone's trying to limit God. I mean, he built everything, so he's not limited. But he has enough mercy to understand who's leaving. If it was extremely deep, not only would they have had to go across, they would have had to go down to
Yep,
get to the dry land, then walk across, then walk all the way back up.
yep,
Not just the 600,000 men, but the children, but the
yep.
cattle, but the old. So he's not limited, but perhaps he took it that way because he understood everyone who would have to traverse once
Yeah,
he did that. He
yeah,
has no
and
limitation, but that's why.
and you bring up some good points. And let me just state, just so people who may not know me, the question, I don't want people to say, well, Ross is someone who doesn't believe miracles. I'm a father of 6 and a grandfather of 9. That life is a miracle. I believe that miracles
Yes.
can happen. The creation, when I look at the stars, as David said. No, so I'm not against miracles at all. What I'm being very careful about is I want to go by what the biblical text says. And you say, well, you don't believe that God could divide a sea with, let me put it this way, an average depth of 130 meters, where, when the water divides, it's going to be taller than that by the rules of displacement. Look, God can make a way through an ocean if he chooses to
Right.
do that. That's not my point. But what I
Right,
want to do
because
is, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
his point wasn't to say this is what I can do. Uh, he had to get the people through.
That's right.
So, I think people are thinking, and all of a sudden they want to be insulted because they think that's what people are doing when they say it couldn't have been. No, no one's trying to say God has any limit, but God
Right.
knew his goal wasn't just to say, look what I can do. He was also trying to get the people there. And they can't get across like you're saying all
Yeah,
of that. They just couldn't. And I know that it may not all be time, but he says, you know, when it was dark, this is what happened. Okay, so how fast can they walk? I
right.
mean, if we're talking about the depth down, and then you want it to be a really big part, then they have to walk a long way across. Then they have to walk up. It- It's a lot.
Yeah,
So the first thing they want to think is getting insulted because you're trying to limit God. And it's like, no, that's not it.
that's right. And to your
Okay.
point, every year when I would tour for many years, James Tabor and I toured together, and we would. You can look at a map if you're not familiar with Israel, but just as an example, we would take a bus load of 35 to 45 people, usually right in that area. We would go to the top of the Mount of Olives with this group, and you had some who were really young, some were really a little bit older, some were in good shape, some were not, some were, but every year that on his tour, we would begin at the top of the Mount of Olives and we would follow the trail and walk down into the Kidron Valley, past the tombs, and then up to Mount Zion. And I've talked to several people who lead tours, and I know that we have some Israelis who are on with us today, and they can tell this is I mean, it's not. We did it every year, and the elderly made it, and those who were not in such great shape made it, and everyone made it. But at the same time, it was easier for some than others, and that's a very little
Mhm.
bitty example. Now, if you
Yeah.
talk about what the Pentateuch describes as a departure from the region of Goshen through some body of water out the other side into a wilderness where they navigated certain geographic features to get to Mount Horeb. I don't mind miracles, but I want to be true to the text. So, one of the key points, and I wish someone would address this, maybe who holds a different view than I do about the body of water being in that Nile region, that Nile Delta region, is what do you do with the book of Joshua, where Joshua clearly says in chapter 3 and chapter 4, verse 19, Joshua makes it a point that he's been at both according to the account. He was there for the crossing of Yam Suf just 40 years before, and now he leads a crossing into the land, and he compares the two like they're the same. And he says, just as this, you did this. That to me is one of the biggest evidences that this was not a crossing of a sea with 130 meters or 800 meters of water on each side. You know how tall? 800 meters. I mean, that's a lot of water. All right, I didn't mean to get off on that, but that's one of the biggest points I think in this. So, Julia, to your point, I'm like you. I'm not saying at all that God can't do a miracle, but I'm saying the Bible calls the crossing of the Jordan a miracle and compares it with the crossing of Yam Suf. From the guy was at both. It would have been a perfect opportunity when describing the crossing of crossing of the Jordan to say, "Dear Lord, on a much itty bitty teenier example, you've done for me what you did to Moses. I mean, he got 800 meters of water on a wall on either side, and I got up to the waist, but it was a miracle." So, and it doesn't say that, so I think that's important. Um, And Julia, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm ready. You ready to jump back
Nope,
in?
that's all. That's all I needed to say. That's all I was
Good.
trying to say.
Hey, good comments. I appreciate you as always. I see okay, we have Karen raising her hand. Karen, jump in. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Got you. I got you. Yep.
Okay. Um, yeah, I've been thinking about the miracles and this idea of divine order that you've been talking about in the past couple of episodes,
Hmm.
Ma'at and things like that. Um, is there a Hebrew word? I know Ma'at is Egyptian. Is there a Hebrew word for divine order?
Divine order.
Like in Sanskrit, it's Dharma. In Chinese, it's Tao or Tao, or however you say that. And
you
then
know, I'll
Egyptian,
have to
it's
think
Ma'at.
about that.
Is there a Hebrew?
I have to think about that because it doesn't hit me right away. Maybe Aryeh or one of the others, maybe others who also know Hebrew can think of a word. So if Aryeh or some of you missed it, the idea that Karen's bringing up in Egyptian, this word ma'at does indicate this orderly kind of idea, and what would that be in Hebrew? So I don't know. I don't know right away. But I did write it down, Karen, and I am going to look at that. Other people may already have an answer for me. I don't know what it would be.
Gotcha.
Well, I don't know, and let me put it this way. I don't know how it would have where it appears. Okay, so Aryeh does says we don't really have this concept, but words like Seder or Derek or Torah would refer to our lifestyle walk, but not necessarily a divine order. Yeah, Seder is, in a way, probably pretty close, if you will.
hmm
And even for most of you are familiar with the word Seder from the Passover, and the meal is followed according
Right.
to an order and so forth. So I don't know. But it is a good question. It is a good question.
I just, there's all kinds of, texts from other cultures and other beliefs, and they're centered around trying to understand the way of all things,
Yeah,
divine order and things like that.
yeah.
And traditions are built out of those. And, I think there's
Hmm.
some existential Jewish things that are built off of that as well.
Yeah,
Um, but I see more, Deuteronomy, Book of Moses kind of stuff is more centered on following divine orders, not necessarily understanding them.
yeah, yeah.
And when
And
we
the
try to
yeah,
understand the miracles, it's almost like we're getting in the weeds a little bit.
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and the other thing that we find in your question sort of alludes to is it. I would take it the next to the next place, which may be off of your point, but what we do see is we do see concepts and various things that are reflected in the priestly material in particular that does trace, it seems, to more of an Egyptian origin than anything else. I mean, we do see that, and you would expect that if you have a group of people who, for the most part, have spent, depending on which account you read, depending on which figure you go with, several hundred years in Egypt. The example I
hmm
often use is America is a melting pot, is what we call it. There are a lot of other names it's probably called, but melting pot. We have people who can trace their ancestry back to England, Ireland, Scotland, Africa, wherever, and we all come here. But in a way, even though all of us may somehow want to attach to our roots, we've become something else, something other. And the Egyptian culture really comes out in the Pentateuch and the rest of the Bible, particularly in the priestly literature. And by the way, while I'm not leaving you there, Karen, you may have more, but I was going to say there is, I saw Aryeh had posted, of course, we kind of accept mostly Richard Friedman's hypothesis in his book, Exodus, that it was probably just the tribe of Levi who made the Exodus. So if you're not familiar, there are theories that the facts as we have them in the Pentateuch, we have to make sure we're understanding properly. For instance, it says 603,550. For a long time, people have looked at that number and said, that's just too big. And so they look for another way to understand it. So one of the questions that comes up, and Friedman doesn't go with this, by the way, but this is one of the questions that comes up. Could it mean, Aleph can mean 1,000, but it can also mean a clan. So could it be 600 clans instead of 600,000? And that becomes one of the debates. In other words, the number might be right, but we're misunderstanding the way it's worded. And then when you get into some of these other questions, some of the same kind of things pop up. You're like, well, am I reading more into this or am I misunderstanding? And of course, I don't necessarily buy Friedman's view that it was only the Levites, but let me tell you what I do see. His evidence is based on this. Friedman shows that we have 13 Egyptian names in the Pentateuch. 13 names that can be traced back to Egyptian language. And all 13 are Levitical. So,
Okay.
you know, he suggests then that it was only the Levites who were in Egypt. I think, and who am I, but I just think that that's too much on too little evidence. But I do see his point. So I take what he comes up with, and what I say is I do see a heavy Egyptian influence on Israelite religion as it's presented in the priestly literature. You know, everything from the Ark of the Covenant to the building of this building, circumcision. A lot of people don't know this, but circumcision, Egyptians practiced circumcision. This isn't something that they didn't know. So a lot of these rites and religious things that we think are Egyptian and counter to Israelite, we're just wrong. A lot of what
Yeah.
Israelite religion presents, I mean, even the name Moses is Egyptian.
Right.
And so anyway, so when your question is about Ma'at, I think that concept, I'm just not smart enough on my feet to give you an answer on that. But I think you've puzzled me, and I'm going to go back and look and see if I can't find
Okay.
what that would be.
And I have another question.
Yep.
Kind of along this line a little bit.
Okay.
And I should have looked it up and given you references, but I was just thinking about it. In the prophets, there's certain areas where, you know, they're speaking for God, and it's like quoted in as God speaking, and he says he had to send his arm. You know, I had to send my arm to deal with this. What do you think his arm is?
Man, you just sat down yesterday and said, I'm just going to stump him all around. I think the reason a lot of people get into this, and we see it in Isaiah, we see it in Deuteronomy, and the idea of the arm is often associated, this is not my view, but it's often associated with messianic, or somehow it's interpreted to be messianic in some sense. Again,
We'll have a theory. I have a
go
theory
ahead.
on that.
I want to hear
It kind
it.
of
I want to
leads
hear
back
it.
to the Exodus and this other stuff too. So, in Lao Tzu's writing, he has this idea that he kind of puts forth, and I've been really thinking about it, that the God who created natural law also keeps it. And I know a lot of people won't agree with that, and in a year I may not agree with that either.
Yeah.
But it's just something to think about. You know, is his arm the earth? Does he use natural phenomena to fulfill his will? You know, because there are different ways that you could explain all the things that happened in the Exodus through natural phenomena, but, you know, gravity, the pull of Mars, and there's people will say that Mars was on a destructive orbit with the Earth and, you know, would have caused the water to pull back like a tide. You know how the tides are controlled by the gravity of the moon.
Yeah.
And, there's all these different things. The explosion of, I think Simca does a,
Yep. Yep.
a documentary where he talks about Santorini explosion being at the same time
Right.
and all these things on, and, the blood being, sealed, actually sealed and coagulating the door, creating a seal, a barrier so the gas couldn't get through, all these different things. I mean, clearly God knew, is the earth his arm? Is he using his arm to enact his will? I don't know. That's just something
Well,
I've thought about.
Yeah, I see Joe Dell may want to come on. She's mentioned something that she has a theory in her book about the arm. Clearly, I would just say that often the arm is associated with a figure, with
Mhm.
I hesitate to use the word messianic figure because that's not a biblical phrase, but a figure, a redemptive eschatological figure nonetheless.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's up for discussion. And let's see. I don't know. I'm not putting Jodelle on the spot. She may not want to jump in right away, but she certainly says
I
she's got.
I think
Maybe
she
she
does want to
can.
jump in, so
You think?
I'll
Okay.
go ahead and mute myself and let other people talk about
Hey, good points,
other
Karen. I
stuff.
appreciate you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Um, yeah, I don't know. Well, who's next? Who wants to jump in and tackle some of these things? There are explanations. People seek explanations for the miraculous, and so we see that all throughout the text in various commentators. Okay, I see Joe Dell is unmuted. Hey, Joe Dell, how are you?
I am well. So I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand. So
That's all right.
I think if Seth put together a Discord for Dummies, how do you do everything file, I think that would help a lot of us. I'm just going to say maybe over the age of 30
All right.
civilization. But, anyways,
Yeah.
regarding the arm of Yahweh, this was actually something I had to study when I was doing the suffering servant. And it always is a metaphor used to describe his power and his might. So it's just kind of a metaphor. It's always in the arm. And when you think of it, the arm is kind of the sign of your strength. It's what you do. Weightlifters today, when you have a competition, it's usually, bench presses or something like that to show strength. And the same concept seems to have existed anciently. The second thing regarding God observing his own law, in volume 1, I developed a theory for truth. Number 1, it's constant, and it includes the concept of righteousness. And part of that concept of righteousness you find in Deuteronomy 32. It says that Yahweh is a God without sin, without iniquity. He is just and righteous. Well, if he's without sin, it means he does indeed obey his own divine law. So I very much hold to the belief that Yahweh is not arbitrary in any way. If it's in the Torah, he follows it. His judgments follow with what's written according to the covenant, and he doesn't act arbitrary to that. And I'm fleshing that out in this forthcoming series. But
Yep.
anyways, I thoroughly agree with that statement.
Good deal. Good deal. Yeah, I think, and I know different people when we talk about the arm of the Lord. You can look at that. I mean, people can do a study on the Hebrew and and do a track. You're going to find primarily, and that's why I mentioned you. I know that you've done a lot on Deutero Isaiah. If you do a search for the Hebrew phrase, not the English, but the Hebrew phrase, you're going to basically see it in Isaiah 44, 5, Isaiah 51, 9, Isaiah 53, 1, and that's it. I mean, you can find variations on Zoroa, the arm. What does that mean? We can interpret it, But the phrase arm of the Lord, Zeroah Yehovah, or Zeroah Yahweh, as you put it, that's where you're going to find. And that's it. So again, I think a lot of people they emphasize some things, or they seek an understanding of things that we don't have a lot. And that's why you, as an author and a researcher, you had to really dig in to try to find out what is this, I would assume. Is that right? Because it doesn't give us a lot. I mean,
Yeah,
go
you
ahead.
know,
Yep.
one thing I'll say too, I was about to write this. If you look at the works of Sir Isaac Newton and even a lot of the American founding fathers, they definitely express the idea of the Torah as natural law. You also find that in a lot of modern Jewish works, um, as far as people who deal, say, with the United States Constitution, as well as others who just deal with Torah as natural law. I have a few books. I'll see if I'll go pick them up off my shelf and post some links in the comments for people who are interested in following up with that idea
Look,
further.
let me say this. This is your chance to practice Discord for Dummies, Joe Dale. I have to do it too. So here's what you do. You go, you're right here. Everyone, look to the left, and you should see dialogue. If you're a member of this group, you should see the dialogue. And if you see the dialogue, that's where I want you to put those books, because in the dialogue, Joe Dale, one of the categories is book club. So I started doing that as well. When you see that you have a book you want to share with other people, or especially if we're talking about something in the class, put them there in the dialogue, and that way everybody sees them, and they can click on the links and so forth. So give it a whirl. And look, if you get stuck, you do have my phone number, so call me in a little while. Okay, Julie says that Nadine has also had her hand up for about 10 minutes. Nadine is going to choke me because I didn't miss her. I didn't get to see her the other day when I was in Canada, and now I'm making her wait all this time. Is your arm tired? All right, I'm ready, Nadine. I'm sorry. Hey,
Thanks, Julia. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Yep.
Um, I was going to bring it back to Exodus 15,
Okay.
and just wanted to share that I entertained the idea of the Gulf of Aqaba being the site of the crossing for quite many years. But the scripture that really had me thinking and kind of reject that idea was Exodus 15, starting in verse 14.
Okay.
And if I can read the three verses, if that's okay.
Please. Yeah, please.
So Exodus 15, verse 14. Peoples heard, they trembled. Anguish gripped the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom were troubled. The mighty men of Moab, trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan melted. Fear and dread fell on them. By the greatness of your arm, they are as silent as a stone until your people pass over, O Yehovah, until the people whom you have bought pass over.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the people of Philistia and Canaan to be scared,
Yep.
they couldn't have passed over the Gulf of Aqaba, because that would be the land of Moab and Edom, but not the land of Philistia or Canaan.
Yep.
And so that was a really key scripture for me to actually reject the Gulf of Aqaba crossing, and be, that the Israelites had to go into the land of all four of these peoples. And I think the only way that can happen is if they're crossing much closer to Egypt. And as you suggest now, I don't know if it's the Gulf of Suez or the Great Bitter Lake or some other place, but that was really key for me.
Excellent point. And while you're in 15, look at verse 22. I think, Nadine, it says the same thing, or at least confirms the same point. Then Moses ordered Israel to set out from the Yam Suf, or the Red Sea as it's translated, Sea of Reeds, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. And what I would encourage everyone to do is look at a map. Look, I know that people are very opinionated about where their Red Sea crossing is. I mean, people want to fight over this stuff. I'm getting hate mail from someone who used to love me, I think, because I've taken a different view than they did. Now they think I'm just a dud. I don't even know how to read. But I still love this person, by the way. But when you look at any Bible map and say, where is the wilderness of Shur? You cross through the sea. Okay, let's play. We're all walking. Act like you're walking. You're going through the sea, going through the sea. You can make your sea 800 meters high. You can make it, 130 meters high, or you can make it like I did, and it's not that deep, but it's still a miracle. You get to the other side, and Moses looks at you, and he goes, hey, guys, okay, now we're walking into the wilderness of Shur. We're walking into, and everybody says, yeah, here I am in the wilderness of Shur. Notice this. If you want your Mount Sinai to be east of Aqaba, you've got to move a wilderness. You have to literally take the wilderness of Shur. Everybody knew where it was 15 minutes ago, and now you go, no. I want my Jebel Allahs to be the mountain because this young guy has got a good book out on it, and he made a nice movie. So we're going to move Shur east of Aqaba. I just think that it's not tenable. So I'm like you, Nadine, on this and look, if we follow the clues, we still can't figure it all out. I'm admitting I don't have answers. Jim kicked us off with a question I can't quite answer. Where is Pi Hachirot? I don't know, but I do have an idea where Migdal is. And if Migdal is in Egypt and it's one of the points mentioned right there, maybe we have to look there. So, and again, another thing, I know that for a long time when I would see people as a Christian years and years ago, I remember, I think it's in Galatians where Paul mentions that Horeb or Sinai is in Arabia. And so everybody today says, well, let me get a map. They pull up a map online today. Oh, here's Saudi Arabia. That's where my Sinai is. And so you go, well, look, I'm going to write a book and a movie and take people there. They have a big split rock and voila, you're done. It's a little more tough than that. So
Yeah, it's impressive in any case. But
it
I
is.
agree. Yeah, I agree with you, Ross. But I think the wilderness of sin, without having been there, or it could have been a different name of some other place. So, but I think that because we know where the land of the people were, I think for me that was like really important.
That's right.
I want to point, and because I think we could probably at least put a lower bound and maybe even a higher bound as to how high or how deep the water was, because of the word wall, and that's it's in Exodus 14:29. There was
Okay.
a wall to them on their right and on their left, and I don't think that if there was 800 meters of water, it would be called a wall.
Yeah.
So I think we're looking at maybe 2 meters, maybe 10 meters, but the idea that it's a wall, not this like cavernous,
Yeah.
massive thing. But it does have to be deep enough to cover an army of Egyptians.
Yeah.
So it can't be a knee-deep wall.
Yeah.
I
That's
would
right.
say
Yeah.
that somebody can just peek over. It has to be quite large.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So there could be a range of depth that could be estimated from those concepts, perhaps.
So I'm going to confess. I don't like the water. I'm actually scared of water. I don't know. I used to deep sea fish and people even say, well, how did you do that if you're scared? I just don't like it. I don't like watching movies like the Titanic. One of the books I'm writing deals with a ship that sinks in the Atlantic, and I get nauseous and sweaty when I even write about this. But so when I think about, like you said, a wall, whether it's 130 meters, this average depth, the Gulf of Suez, 130 meters. I say that, and people don't get how deep that is. You're talking, I mean,
It's huge.
imagine on either side, the wall of water is that high. And so when I challenge that view, or the 800 meter of the Gulf of Aqaba, people get fighting mad, like, how dare you suggest that God can't do that? I'm not saying God can't. You know, it's the old thing, can God make a rock so heavy he can't pick it up? I mean, I'm not trying to get philosophical here. I'm just saying that it need not be that deep, especially, and I really, one of the evidences you mentioned, Nadine, that this really hit you in Exodus 15. It's powerful. What hit me was this passage in Joshua, because I wasn't doing a study on the crossing of the sea at the time. I was doing another study in Joshua. And I remember when I read that, I said, whoa, 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 wait a minute. You're telling me that the crossing of the Jordan is being compared by a man who supposedly was at both to the crossing of the sea. That would be incomparable if you go through a river. Even the Mississippi River here is big, but the Jordan is not. And even back in that day, we have studies, geological studies, that tell us it was more than it is now. But if they could cross that, and the Joshua says, it's just like that one, that doesn't. I said that there's no way you would compare the two. Anyway.
I absolutely agree. And there's also the Exodus 17:5 that calls it a river, that calls the crossing in Egypt a river, right? So I agree that it has to be a comparable crossing to what you're suggesting in Joshua for the Jordan. So yeah, I'm on board with that.
Well, and the thing is, and this is the beauty of what we're doing here, even this person who is upset with me now, having listened to today's class, I mean, she may be with us today, I don't know. But if she is, I want you to come forward. I want you to feel free to express why you think that I'm wrong, because let me tell you, I have been wrong many, many, many times in my life, and I am certainly willing to accept correction. If there are biblical passages which disprove my theory, I want to hear them, because I don't want to be wrong. Or why would I want to be wrong? I'm not going to be wrong intentionally, and so I want people to correct me, but I want them to use biblical text to do it. That's the only requirement, and I would only ask humbly that they do that. Say, Ross, you're wrong. Like this person says, Migdal is not a place, but it just means a tower. So I say, go read Numbers 33, Jeremiah 44, Jeremiah 46, Ezekiel 29, Ezekiel 30. Those references, and show me that Migdal is not the Migdal of the Exodus, and it can't be done because it's clearly the same. Anyway, good stuff, though. Hey, I wish I could have met you in person, but next time, or you guys come see me either way. All right. Hey, thanks, Nadine. Hey, Eric, look, your buddy Seth got tired of me not calling on you quick enough, so he pulled you on stage with us. I'm looking at you. How are you?
I just decided to make my camera work, and it looks like it is. That's
It
great.
is.
Yeah, I was going to go backwards to the more esoteric discussion before about divine, and I can't remember the word now because I've been inundated with these other
Divine
things.
order is what someone said.
Okay. Well, I put the term that I was going to guess might be something to help you search it out. I got Hashgacha Pratis or something similar. It's up there a little bit. It is a lot of times translated as divine providence, but the Baal Shem Tov he likes to do it as divine direction in each individual creation's life.
Okay.
And Rabbi Brody has written a book called Divine Direction, which kind of explains it all. Might help you research the term.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, send me, by the way, you can email me or message me. Let me know, if you have something like that, this is the word you found, send it to me. I'd be happy to look at it too and see what I can figure out.
Yeah, we'll do it. Thanks.
All right, my brother. Okay. Who we got here? John Langberg, you got some comments? Hey, I know that guy. All right. Okay. He just popped in to say hello. He was with us this morning in here. What else? Any other comments? Hopefully everyone is enjoying this second pass. Seth is still working hard on these videos that we're playing now. Obviously, you can tell I didn't grow my beard back full in just a few minutes. I think in that, for some strange reason, when I did that video a year and a half, 2 years ago, I thought that I wanted to go back to a goatee, and I did that. And probably, if I know me, I probably regretted it as soon as I put the razor down. But he still has to work to get these ready, and he's done a good job of. Sometimes the quality is not so bad or not so good, and he's trying to digitally enhance what was done some time back. But we intend to do some good brainstorming this week to work on our project that we're working on. Both of us have been busy with other things as well. And so I hope that many of you are joining us in the middle of the week for the series with Jono. We're doing a special series on Shapira, working through the entire Shapira saga. Last week, or this past week, we did the Mesha Stela, the Moabite stone, and that was a fun class. I think you'll get some good bit out of that. And we're going into the Moabitica, this phase of Shapira's life that has brought many people to the point that they say, well, he was a forger because of this story of the Moabitica, and therefore once a forger, always a forger, and so the scroll is fake. But it's not as simple as it might seem. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, or not today, but this week. But I don't have to go just yet. So if any of you have any comments or questions, please jump in and let me know. I'm mainly concerned with, for this class, and I want you to take this with you this week. I hope you jump in and do a little research and study. But where is that C? Look at the clues of the text. Charles, did I see you unmute? Are you ready to jump in and ask a question or bring a comment?
Well, sure I am.
Hey, how's it going, Charles?
Oh, we're good, brother. We're good. Hey, listen, if I was going to drown an army, I would not take them through the Ouachita River. I might use the Mississippi River. Don't think I'm going to use the swamp. I'm sure not going to use the creek.
Yep.
So it's going to have to be a big old chunk of water, or it's going to have to be a really wide swamp with lots of gators.
Yep, I hear you. And that's the thing. A lot of people say, look, man, it says that there's a wall on either side and it came crashing down, and they found these Egyptian soldiers on the shore. The question becomes, how wide is this region? Now, what people might think I'm suggesting is that this is just a little puddle. And it's not that at all. These canals, there was quite a bit to them. And let me tell you, if water is pulled back and water is released, the power of water is pretty strong. So, I mean, God could drown somebody in a teaspoonful of water if he chose to. But again, if you have 800 meters of water standing up on either side, the chances of you finding some Egyptians on that shore are going to be pretty slim too. So the question becomes, what can we ascertain from the text? And you've got basically a poetic view that I covered all the passages. I want people to go through this again if you have to. All the passages which are poetic and describe the water on either side. Look at those, but you also have another view, and I covered all these in the class, where it says that the water was dried up. The wind blew and they went across dry shod. So you have to factor in all of the details. And again, one of the keys, this is one of the single most significant points in determining the body of water. Where is the wilderness of Shur? S-H-U-R. Because when they pass through the water, whichever body of water that is, they are in the wilderness of Shur. So that rules out. It's here's where it comes down to. Either that text is not true, that they crossed through the body of water and they were not in the wilderness of Shur. So that can't be true, or it is true. If it's true, if they cross through the body of water that they called the Yam Suf, and they end up in the wilderness of Shur, it rules out the Gulf of Suez, what we call now the Gulf of Suez, and it rules out the Gulf of Aqaba, what we call the Gulf of Aqaba today. Now, if someone says, Ross, that's not true, you are lying to these people, convince me. Because that's one of the biggest parts of this problem, is identifying how you can go through that body of water and you're in the wilderness of Shur. Again, the solution for some is to just move the wilderness. You know why people move the wilderness of Shur east of the Gulf of Aqaba? Because the Bible says they go through the water and they end up in the wilderness of Shur. Look at that. I want people to see the mysterious movement of a wilderness. Fascinating. Now, I know that I can be opinionated, and some people, I had a friend of mine brought his girlfriend to my house about 30 years ago, and she said that he couldn't study with me anymore because I was teaching him some kind of heresy or something. By the way, he hadn't been back, so she was right. But what was funny was when I said, well, what is it that you don't agree with? And she said, well, and she gave her list. And I read that verse to her, and she said, right there, I don't believe it the way you read it. It was my inflection or something that she thought was heretical. But anyway, side story. What I'm curious about, though, I hear your point. So what body of water fits the criteria is really the question that we leave here today with. Because if we get the sea wrong, then we're going to be off. When I was in the military and learned land navigation with a lensatic compass, they told us very early in these classes that if you call it an azimuth, if you determine I need to walk 180 degrees for however many miles, if you're at 160 instead of 180, you're going to be off. Now, as soon as you depart, you're not going to be off that far, but as you go miles and miles, you're going to be way off. Well, it's the same thing here. If we get the sea wrong, then we're going to obviously put our Horeb or our Sinai in the wrong place. That makes sense? Charles, I may not have let you finish, my man. Anything else you wanted to cover? I get your point, though.
If someone was trying to show me where they drowned the whole army, we don't know the size of the army, but they can't show me Bayou Bartholomew. They can't show me Washita River. I'm not going to look at too many swamps as possibilities.
Yeah.
Credibility is going to have to be based on a little bit of logic, too.
Yeah. The question, you have to tie logic with text fact, and the question becomes, and this is as a brotherly assignment, does it say it destroyed the whole Egyptian army, and how many were there, and does it give us any of that detail, or are we basing our criteria off of a really good movie, a painting? What was it? What was it that really comes down to it? And again, you have to think, according to our view, if we have, say, 3 million people, the size of Houston or Chicago, and they've left Egypt. And at some point, the biblical account seems like it's right away, but at some point, imagine, now, how quickly do you think 3 million, let's say Chicago, let's say the people of Chicago are leaving there and they're going to another place. How long would it take to exit Chicago, every man, woman, child, and chicken? Everybody, everything, all the animals, everything. Remember, they didn't leave anything behind. So from the time the last people leave, how long does it take? Now, did they send the whole Egyptian army? Did the whole Egyptian army chase after them? And if so, how long would it take an Egyptian army in chariots to catch up with the people in the back? But the Bible presents that this group of Israelites, the Hebrews, leave en masse. They all cross through whichever body of water they cross through. They get safely on the other side, all Chicago, and then this body of water comes down. It depends, again, if you're reading the poetic or the other. So there are a lot of criteria that we have to look at, and we have to kind of factor in. So look at it hard. Look at it hard, and help me to determine, because look, like Dave Tyler said, Patty, Dave, a few others, and I have been several times to scope out one of the possible sites for Mount Horeb. We think that it's a candidate. I mean, it's on the list. There are about 15 proposed sites for Mount Horeb or Sinai, about 15. 15 that are in the running. There are more than that, but 15 that really kind of, you could see a little bit here and there. Of those 15, there are 3 that are the favorites. And the 3 favorites generally, now Simca chooses one that's a little bit different. It's close to the one that I'm looking at, but it's Hashem Al Tarif, I think, is the name of the place. I'll look. So Simca's got one, but the 3 that are most contentious in the running, one is the one that the Tylers and I have been to several times with Jono, and that's called it's not Horeb, but it's Karkom, Har Karkom, and that's a modern name for this mountain. It's Dr. Anadi is the guy who put forward this theory. The other one that is popular is the Sinai in the south. It's St. Catherine's. That's a very popular one. And then the third one, probably the most popular and mostly among evangelicals. It's really the Christians who love this, and some people who aren't Christian, but mostly people who are Christian or were Christian. And they like this Jebel Aluz in Saudi Arabia. So anyway, it's a fun study. It's a fun study. Does it matter? Because some people might say, it doesn't affect my faith one way or the other. I believe that God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and that's the main point. Whether he made them cross through the Nile Delta, the canals there, which are not just puddles, by the way. Imagine a strong wind, strong enough to push a body of water into a wall that would actually clear it dry land so that a massive group of people could go, and then that water continues to back up until it's unleashed. We've seen flooding in this region where I live in Louisiana, where vehicles are pushed and shoved and people drown. And that's not 150 meters of water. That's not even as high as a car. All right, let me look quickly through the notes and see if I missed anything. Jodell says we can do a hurricane in about 12 hours, but that's with tons of traffic. All right, some of you don't have to deal with hurricanes. You're very fortunate and blessed. But you might have snow to deal with. We put up with this stuff. Karen says, probably, I think it's our nature to try and understand chaos versus order, which can be an exercise in futility, but it can be good to see others' experience and thoughts on certain subjects as long as we're putting the following of divine order above understanding it. All right. Any final parting comments, questions, something burning that you can't wait until next week? Let me have it now. It is, it's 1:30, so we've been going for a little over an hour. I had a wonderful time chatting with all of you.
Can you hear me, Moses?
I can hear
Can
you.
you hear me?
I can hear you. Who
Hey,
is this?
This Kim.
Hey, Kim.
Hey, you're blowing my mind. This is stuff I have never even thought of. So this is just really great. But another common sense observation is one, yeah, you can have all these people, 3 million people pass through a water of some sort. You don't have really a definition as to how wide it is because, but it's just how long it takes to get through. But you have to kind of guesstimate with the Egyptian army, if you could guess how big it is, how wide it would be for all of them to all of a sudden be swallowed up.
Yeah.
That would be a long line. And number two, the biggest common sense thing to me that blows my mind, I'm in the Egyptian army and I'm coming up to this party and I'm going to go through that. I can't swim. I'm going to go chase these guys through this. Are you following me? They're viewing this parting of some sort.
Yeah.
It would be scary to me and kind of foolish if I can't swim to be chasing them.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the whole story, I do believe that there is a story behind these events. And, I think about it. I mean, the Bible, this is fundamental, foundational, bedrock. You have to believe the Exodus from Egypt. Everybody talks about it. It's in the 10 words, that God brought the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. And, and over we read about how he brought them out of this iron furnace and, over and over and over and over. It's the way, according to many, many texts, God made himself a name by delivering Israel out of the land of Egypt. It's in the Moses scroll. Everything that we see, Dead Sea Scrolls, this is fundamental to the faith. The details of which we have to look at and we have to consider and we have to think, is this to be taken literally? Is it poetic? Is it presented to us in ancient poetry, or is it prose? All of these things are things that, things that we run into as we study the subject. I'm not suggesting that the events didn't happen. What I am asking us to do, and earlier someone brought up Richard Friedman's book on the Exodus. And one of the things that he says is, and I think Jodell brought up last week, he was one of the consultants on the Disney movie on the Exodus, The Prince of Egypt, I think it's called. But he says that when he was 10 years old, Richard Elliott Friedman said that, he's 10 years old, he said he went and saw the movie, The 10 Commandments, Charlton Heston. And he said it was so impactful to a young Jewish boy that he says he thinks that it's probably the one of the main reasons he became a biblical scholar. He fell in love with the Bible story about his people based on that movie. All of us tend to get a picture in our mind. A mind is a powerful tool. A picture in our mind will often be very difficult to root out. So if we imagine our exodus from Egypt based on Charlton Heston being Moses, I mean, I almost think Moses sounds like him because it's part of what we grew up with. We tend to, a lot of times, our beliefs, our views, the images in our mind are tied to something we've seen or heard, movies, whatever. So you have to be careful. We have to be really careful. And so, Kim, I blow my mind first by simply reading the text and asking questions of the text. And what I don't want to do is be guilty of taking the picture in my mind that may have come to me from watching a movie when I was 10 years old and importing that into the biblical text and making the biblical text then fit that picture. Because quite often that's wrong. Richard Elliott Friedman asked a question, and he makes this statement following it. He says, if the children of Israel, again, size of Houston or Chicago, leave Goshen, there's 3 million. How wide is that movement of people? Is it 8 meters across? Is it 100 meters across? Is it 200 meters across? And he decides that if it's, I don't remember how many he said across, by the time that first group steps forward to leave Goshen, by the time they get to Sinai, even a reasonably wide group of people, the last people are still going, honey, wait, don't forget the menorah there. Make sure you get all the, did you feed the dogs? I mean, they're still in Goshen because it's such a massive line of people. Now, of course, if your Sinai is further, then you got a little more time. But anyway, these questions are fun to entertain, and what I want people to understand is I love the biblical text, and what I want to do is do the best we can to get at the original meaning of these words and try to understand and place where it is that we're looking for. So, okay, now I see Sue is looking for a way to raise her hand, and look, I got you. I see you already. So, Sue, come live for me. Let's see what you got.
Can you hear me?
I do hear you.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I did have a question for you. I'd really be interested to hear your reasons as to why you disagree with Friedman regarding the priestly caste being the only group that exited Egypt.
Excellent question. My main reason is that, in my view, it takes a very good piece of evidence and stretches it too far, if I can. So what I mean by that is, if there are a lot of textual traditions, even in the priestly sources, which suggest that Israel goes to Egypt as a family and you have representatives from these different groups. Now, again, a lot of academics don't buy this. They say that's later added into the story. But stick with me 1 second on this, Sue. But what he says, he takes what I consider to be a very good piece of evidence for something else, and that is namely this. You have 13 names, 13 Egyptian names, or Egyptian-based names that come to us from the Egyptian loan words, we call them, Egyptian loan names, in the Pentateuch. And he says, aha, here you've got the only Egyptian names in the Pentateuch story, and they are all Levitical. So and I know you know this, Sue, I'm just kind of sharing it with the rest of the group who may not be familiar. So he then says, if, follow me, he goes, if all the names, all the Egyptian loan words which appear as names in the Pentateuch are Levites, then only the Levites were living in Egypt. And I think that that's more than can be pulled from that clue. Now, what I would say instead, and I'm sure that if Richard Elliott Friedman is listening to me today, he would have an opposing point. So, Richard, if you're here, let us know. But I think what he would say is it's not far stretched at all. He puts that theory forward, and he says, and he's not so matter of fact as I recall, but he does present it as pretty solid evidence for his theory. What I would suggest is that there may be something to this. Let me go ahead and see how I can put this without becoming so I don't get thrashed by everybody. I'm going to present it as his view because it is. All right, so we ready? So he says, if you look at the Hebrew word for Levite, Levi is a word that's very closely associated in Hebrew with to join. It doesn't mean to join, but it's very close to the word for join. So a lot of fundamentalist Hebraists would say, well, that's because Levi ultimately is joined to the other tribes in their sacerdotal duties and so forth. But what some scholars propose is that Levi, the name Levi, indicates that they are not native Israelites. Don't throw the tomatoes yet. This is an academic view. They say that these Levites were not really part of Israel. They were later added to the story as a son of Leah, and all that stuff they would say is made up. Now, fundamentalists would say, well, you have gone too far to say that. But what they do is we have various texts in the Bible which list the names of the children of Israel, and sometimes the Levites are mentioned and sometimes they're not. So all of these things go together. Friedman and others put their understanding of the clues to say, okay, I think, this is what they would say, I think the group known as Levites, who are clearly excluded from inheritance and so forth because their portion is Jehovah according to the text, they see that this group is an outside group who attaches themselves, they're welcomed in, but they attach themselves to Israel. It is interesting, like I said, that Friedman points out that all Egyptian names are Levites, but I think it's too far for me to throw out all of the patriarchal narratives. That's just my view. Does that answer, or did I just hit all over the place and miss the question? Is that good enough?
You really answered my question. I very much appreciate your insight on that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sue. And look, I'm still studying these things. Every time as I work in the text of the Pentateuch and I see one of these names, including Moses, and I think about, wow, all Egyptian names are Levites. It's certainly, there's something there that I haven't quite determined yet. And again, one other thing that I constantly look at is how closely does Egyptian religion, from what we know about it, and we learn more and more all the time, what we know about Egyptian religion, how closely does that mirror what became Hebrew religion? And those are questions that I have. Jim, I see your hand up. Yes.
Let me unmute. Okay. Yes. Thank you. No, I like all kinds of history, and having grown up as a child 15 miles from Gettysburg, Civil War history has been something I've studied off and on for my whole life, at least since I've been aware of how to read and all that type of thing. But one of my most recent books, I found a book about Robert E. Lee's retreat from Gettysburg after he lost the battle.
Okay.
His wagon trains were 40 miles long, and it was two different routes because they had two escape routes that they could get away from the Yankees and have some kind of chance to have a rear guard and all that. So that was only 70,000 people. Of
Yeah.
course, a lot of wagons and horses, but most of the men walked. Only the wounded were riding, and obviously the wagon drivers were riding as well. But anyhow, just give you an idea of what it's like to have a large group of people all strung out. There were people ready to cross the Potomac River, which is between Maryland and at that time Virginia or West Virginia, depending what part you're crossing.
Yeah.
And some of the men haven't even left Gettysburg yet.
Right.
So just give you an idea in, real time before cars and trucks and railroads and that type of thing, how long it took for people to leave a certain area, especially when it's a large group. Just making that
Excellent
comment.
excellent points. Thanks for that comment. And again, what we want to do is we want to look at all the clues. Sometimes the Bible's very silent, and we have to try to ascertain from silence what we've got. But there's an old saying, and some of you may come from the Church of Christ background, but I heard this first from James Tabor. It's speak where the Bible speaks, be silent where the Bible's silent, call Bible things by Bible names, and do Bible things in Bible ways. That idea, the old Church of Christ mentality to approach the text. Don't tell me your views. Don't form your views from what the Bible doesn't say, but what does it say? So when we think about the Exodus, also you have to factor in if you're reading these stories and you're in St. Francisville, Louisiana. I'm using that because that's where I'm at. And you form in your mind a picture of what the Exodus route looks like and what the terrain looks like. You're going to come away with certain feasibility criteria that may or may not work in the real world. I'm telling you, and Dave and I have discussed this a lot. We know geologically we can determine that the terrain has not terribly changed in the past, since 1500 BCE or thereabouts. Now there are changes. We certainly can suppose some changes even in the climate and so forth. But it describes a hot, miserable, lacking water desert. The terrain is difficult. The scorpions what it looks like now? It's hot. It's sand. It's hard to navigate. There are wadis and ravines. And you know what it is? It looks probably not much different than it did when Moses and the Israelites left. So here's the deal. I see people draw maps. Here's the way the Exodus happened. And they draw up a line from Goshen to Saudi Arabia. And they draw, and I know that they're just to save paper or whatever, but their route is too dadgum straight. I've been in portions of that wilderness quite a bit. And let me tell you, there are places that you can't get there from here, is the way we would say it. You simply can't. If everybody was in great physical shape even, and look, people say, yeah, but you're excluding miracles. Like God made all the feeble old people like they were 18 again, and they were in great shape, and they never got thirsty, and they never stumped a toe. Look, that's not what the text says. So the question becomes, the route is based on criteria that they would have experienced. Like I'm telling you, there are places, if you leave from Goshen and you're headed, if you want to make Saudi Arabia your Sinai, if that's where you want to go with this, you've got some challenges to figure out geographically. It's not going to be a straight line, first of all. Here's the other thing. We don't have a real strict timeline, but what we do know is we know the day they left. We know the day they arrived at Sinai or at Horeb, whatever, wherever you place that. And that means that in between leaving and arriving at Horeb, they've already crossed through the sea. The enemy Egyptian army has been drowned, and all of those things happen. So you got to figure out, and I encourage people to try this on your own. I know many of you have. Take good notes. Read the account not only in Exodus, but read, throughout the Pentateuch, read the rest of the biblical accounts. And it's what I tried to do today when I try to determine which body of water it is. 3 bodies of water are called Yam Suf. The Nile Delta, Exodus chapter 10. We've got the Gulf of Suez, and we've got the Gulf of Aqaba in 1 Kings 9:26. Which one is it? I leave it to you. But I caution you, do the best you can, just like I try to do. Not that I perfectly succeed every time, but let's try to make sure that nothing that we read in the text goes against the view that we come out with. If we just, because people, and I get accused of this, people go, oh, you're just picking and choosing. Actually, I'm not. But to avoid that, you want to try to weigh all of the textual evidence. And I know all of you are good Bible students, so you will definitely do the same. But look at it. Go through the verses. I know that Baruch, John Perry, has already posted his class notes here in Horeb. So go to the dialogue, download those notes. You'll have every verse that I mentioned. You can look and you can see, did I skip any? Like I was accused today that I skipped verses that go against my theory. Actually, I didn't. I could have, and it would have made it a lot easier, but I didn't, and I won't. Final comments. I know we've said this for 30 minutes now. Final comments. Seth just posted the pre-notes for today's class in the chat here. If you click that link, you'll go straight there. Final comments, parting words, advice, anything? Look, if you're not a member of the Yakad, join the Yakad. Join us this Wednesday evening. We'll be going live. Jonah and I will do a sort of a behind the scenes. You'll be able to join us in the stage area. And then Thursday, we'll post a video of that discussion. It's fun. We hope you can join us. And thanks for all you do. Thanks for supporting us. We really appreciate it. You help us a lot. You're helping us do everything that we're doing, and we have got some surprises in store. We're working hard. It's a 2-man team, and Seth is the only one with the talent in the team. So imagine if you're him. So thanks for joining us. I look forward to seeing you middle of the week. By the way, let's see. Yep. Monday night, that is 2 nights from tonight, we're going to do our next Hebrew. We're doing reading sessions. You can go back if you're just starting and pick up at the beginning. I want to get a little bit more reading practice, and then we're going to begin to get into a little bit of the grammar. So looking forward to that. And some of you are further along than others, but this is set up for people who just are starting out. So don't be embarrassed. Don't be intimidated. If you want to be part of it, let us know. We'll help you figure out how to do that. Take the rest of the day and enjoy yourself. Have a beautiful Sabbath. I know some of you are in other parts of the world. Your Sabbath is over. Hey, God bless you all. Thanks for joining us. Have a beautiful week.